Later. Oh, sorry.
Human rights, they violated tones, they were too great. So in disgrace now, they live in exile. Gary is a wanted man. Idi Amin is a wanted man. Shah of Iran, fighting hard to survive. He too is wanted, they don't alive.
This is Caribbean Times.
Strikes, demonstrations and wars. Injustice is always the cause. Politicians turn too soon from poor people into tycoons. Corruption must bring horrors. South African Foster resign in disgrace. Missouri will take where Ian Smith plays. The Uganda devil was easily captured, beaten up and chased. What a waste! Gary is a wanted man. Patrick John is a wanted.
Political situation is so complex, who can understand people? And every day people expressing different interpretations. Let us analyze just a little more. Why not thoughts more deeply explore? Forcing our feelings away, be more objective, I say. Even if it's hard, we still have to try. We have to recognize the conditions that brought us so. Then determine which way we want to go. Because it seems to that be the platform is the same now we'll strike the way. So for the way I say, we have no cause but to unite. That's it. And let those who dwell among us without sins cast the first stone. Show me a man who has not done wrong. Each one wants to blame his adversary and hide his own faults. But tell me, how long can this game go on? Where is the love, my people? Where is the unity? We have to build a home on trust and integrity. Yeah. We have to elevate our sense of strength and purpose. We have to understand that this Spice Island must come first.
Radio station that drove over the German Revolution. Fire, trade, laksa, nata, say, don't be blood at the way. I'm
fall. This song for innocent blood is outside. In a revolution, some people are weak, while others are strong. Listen to my song.
Listen, listen to my song. Listen, listen to my song.
The weak turn to counter revolution, subversion and destabilization.
Listen, listen to my song. Listen, listen to my song.
Is it strong ones to stand for and make things right? Show to the weak why we must unite. Weak, them, they don't know who they fighting for. Moving aimlessly in a senseless war. Murdering their people, innocent along the way. But we are with them, so listen when I say, in this care time, oh no, I said they're preaching war, they will kill them for, but I have tourists and glory, but I have tourists and glory, singing but I have tourists and glory, but I have tourists and glory. In a revolution, some people are right, while others are wrong. Listen to my song. The wrong always feel that they have it right, that they are correct, so they want to fight. Is it right ones to lead and show them the way? They get more confusion every day. They offer Judaism and reaction to show these our brothers and dirty works to do. Turn them into robots, puppets on a string. They feel their own sisters and they don't care a thing. In this care time, oh
March 13 of 79, a most historic freedom time. The people of Grenada rose with dignity, rose up from oppression, rose up from iniquity and shame, from the darkness of desperation, shaking up paralysis of corruption, tyranny, violence and subjugation, to shine down before the Caribbean and strike terror into repressive regime, and people as politicians are now trembling in their hands. Stand up, Grenada! Stand up again, Grenadian! Don't let nobody come in and dictate your course of action. All of them who oppose your revolution are political bandits just like they're in their own island. Fight for your right. Protect what you have. You fought a good fight. Protect what you have. Don't give in a single inch. Don't retreat, not even a pinch. Don't compromise your revolution. For those scandalous TV oppressive political scams in the Caribbean. No way, never right, say no way. morality, constitutionality, but only to expose the hypocrisy. But if you examine the state of affairs in their land, you will find human rights violations, total disregard for the Constitution, countless political persecution, and a wave of sanctions violence, with the blessing of legislative criminals enforced by sadistic gangs. Just like the mongoose one, stand up, Grenada! Stand up again, Grenadian! Don't let nobody come in and dictate your course of action. All of them will force your revolution. A political bandit just like they're in their own island. Fight for your rights. Protect what you have. You fought a good fight now. Protect what you have. Don't give in a single inch. Don't retreat, not even a pinch.
Left, right, in the government boost, the government boost. Left, right, in the government boost, the government boost. Left, right, in the government boost, the government boost. Left, right, in the government boost, the government boost. Is it necessary to have so much soldiers in this small country? No, 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 no. Is it necessary to shine soldier boots with taxpayers' money? No, 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 no. Well, don't tell me, tell Tommy, he put them in St. Lucie. Unemployment high and the treasury low, and he buying books to cover soldier toe. I see them books, books, books and more books on the feet of young trigger happy recruits. I see them books, books, books and more books marching, threatening army troops. They'll come, I say, that would undo. You got to see of me and you, and most of all the children, and stop them soldiers from marching. Left, right, the government moves, the government moves. Left, right, the government moves, the government moves. Left, right, the government moves, the government moves. Left, right, the government moves, the government moves.
Shall know who serious but struggle, like those who show they could rise from the rubble of devastation with patriotism and dedication for our reconstruction. Oh, Grenada, land of my birth, the way you suffered. Oh, how it hurts, the tribulations you had to bear. Will make Superman want to despair, but the blood of a martyr must not be shed in vain. Oh no, we must rise and shine again.
Don't sell nobody your days of victory, because only we get our destiny. Oh, Grenada, land of my birth.
You see when it comes to the YouTube thing, it's green.
We'll get Superman, one to the sky. Mother blood of a mother must not be shaken. Oh no, we must rise and shine again. To be a millionaire, some kind of petty bourgeoisie, anytime you live in here, in this country, you got to be in skullduggery, making your money illicitly, to live like somebody in this country. It's outrageous and insane, them crazy prices in Port of Spain, and like the merchants going out their brain, and the working man like the only toiling in vain. Where you ever hear a television for 7,000, $250,000 for in peace and land? A pair of sneakers, $200, 80,000-90,000 for motor cars. At last, here in Trinidad, we see capitalism gone mad. It's sad and getting more bad, because due to capitalism gone mad. Provide for your family today on your present salary is an impossibility in this country. So many bills to pay, there is no conceivable way for a rainy day in this country. Our voraciousness, to be precise, is why every damn thing so overpriced. Big business making everybody feel government give them a open license to steal. Would you believe me? $1 candy is $19.90. $20 for some baby milk. The cheapest jersey costs over 60, 200.
Go beyond to Rhodesia, go beyond to South Africa. You're pushing my back against the wall, I'm calling the tribes of cannibal. I man decide to put on his boots and march to defend his roots. Hey, calling them juju, calling them Zulu, shouting Ashanti, calling what to see in South Africa and Rhodesia. Learn to run like water. Prepare my brother for the bloody river. Just remember, brother, plenty cloud and water. Stay at Zimbabwe, stay at Zimbabwe, stay at Zimbabwe, stay at Zimbabwe. I know this fight won't be so easy, but you got to get rid of the enemy. If you don't get rid of the enemy shall get rid of you. My people, you see, we have no choice, so Africans, hear my voice. Hey, calling what to see. In South Africa and Rhodesia, let's go run like water. Prepare my brother.
Okay. Alright. Comrade.
Let me cheer on.
Alright. Enough respect.
Your actions are so wicked, you make war independently. And then you send in your men captivity every day, talking peace. Like you come out of control, the whole lot judge your boy. You feel you're still in the movies, like you stick up the West Indies. George Chambers really can't take a one. Down with your best Georgie can't spell up like Tom Division. So you can keep your 300 and 10 million.
Money is not the answer to this question.
The basin spring a leak in the Caribbean. Tell him no, Reagan. You're trying to get at Cuba, so you're picking on Guinea. Spreading false propaganda, you are a destabilizer. Your military maneuvers in our territorial areas, like you're waiting to pull the trigger, as you did on Argentina. No, Reagan. Maurice Bishop say you ain't taking the one. Down with your best plan in the Caribbean. Cause Maurice is selling out like Tom Division. So you can keep your 300 and your empty million.
Money is not the answer to this question.
The basin spring a leak in the Caribbean. Tell him no, Reagan. What we need in the Caribbean is a powerful federation. We need to be united and not divided. But you divide Latin America and you deal with Jamaica and Dominica under your command. Since Eugenia Tom fell inside your plan, no Reagan. Fidel Castro say he don't take the one. Down with your best and plan in the Caribbean. But Fidel was selling out like Tom Division. So you could keep your 300 and your empty million.
Money is not the answer to this question.
The basin spring a leak in the Caribbean. Tell him no, Reagan. You aim to control our resources and direct our economy, but stay off Caribbean courses with your modern day piracy. The leaders in the region should come under one union, but this basic initiative is not imperative. You know we got Rastafari and taking. You try with a federation, the whole thing end in confusion. Curriculum and then character, but somehow a spelling disaster. Mr. West Indian politician, I mean you went to a big institution, and how come you can't unite 7 million? When a West Indian unity, I know it's very easy. If you only rap to your people and tell them like me, them is one race, the same place, the same trip, on the same ship. So we must push one common intention, it's for a better life in the region, for we women and we children. That must be the ambition of the Caribbean man, the Caribbean man, the Caribbean man. You say that the Federation was imported quite from England, and you're going and form a character with a true West Indian flavor. But since character started running, morning, noon and night all are hearing, it's just money speech, them prime minister giving. But I say no set of money, good form a unity. Talk up all your people need their identity like one race, from the same place, that make the same trip, on the same ship. So we must push one common intention, it's for a better life in
the mic. Check your mic, Doc. Sonia, your mic is muted.
Good afternoon and good evening to everyone as we begin this forum, the contribution of Cuban trained graduates to the health services in Grenada and in the Caribbean. As we proceed, we will listen to two anthems. First, the Grenada National Anthem, and second, the anthem of the People's Revolution of Grenada.
No, tiene que decírselo que no.
It's on mute.
Good evening and good afternoon again. It is with pleasure that we welcome all our friends and colleagues in Grenada, Carriacou, and Petite Martinique, those in the Caribbean and across the globe. Welcome to the celebration of the 43rd anniversary of the historic People's Revolution of Grenada. A very special welcome is extended to all family, friends, and associates of our three colleagues being honored posthumously today. Dr. Livingston Raphael Stephen Carib John, Dr. David Orville Lambert, Dr. Winston Tomo Thomas, who had lived the vocations with utmost distinction and dedication and service, and who went away far too soon. We also recognize with profound gratitude the Cuban people and the Cuban leadership, whose invaluable and selfless sacrifice over more than 40 years have facilitated opportunity, personal development of our professionals, and ultimately progress of our health system. And they're represented here today by Ambassador Senor Luis Ernesto Morejon Rodriguez. Welcome also a panelist, Dr. George Mitchell, Dr. Kennedy Roberts, and Dr. Douglas Slater. The Grenada Memorial Foundation and the March 13 Committee is pleased to share this celebration of victory, the celebration of stewardship and progress to everyone on all platforms this evening. On October 6, 1979, only 7 months after the triumphant People's Revolution in Grenada, a group of 38 very brave, young and youngish Grenadians journeyed to Havana, Cuba, to take up the promised scholarships in various professional disciplines. As our song, one of our songs that we composed later said, we went to develop ourselves and build a revolution. Among this detachment of patriots, 10 opted to study medicine, while 3 were aspiring dentists, and everyone graduated in due course. Prior to March 13th, remember, Grenada's health services delivery left much to be desired. There was shortage of basic supplies and medicine, limited availability of quality primary and specialized care, absence almost of health education and health promotion, while a significant paucity of highly qualified and motivated personnel had become the expected norm. So dire was the situation that in the early 70s, health workers took to the St. George's streets to protest their plight, only to be promptly and violently accosted and beaten by the henchmen of Gary. And that was over, well, almost. By that fortunate and unprecedented Tuesday morning in March 1979, hope and destiny had solidified, and a perfect union with sacrifice and industry, unity and determination, our people's dreams had become realities. More so, our young people heard the clarion call, took up their roles, and the rest is history that we're celebrating today. So as we begin our celebration, our sharing today, I want to just share with you some of the ground rules. We're going to have all our presentations, and at the end of all our presentations, everyone who is interested, who is willing to, should be given an opportunity to comment. We're asking everyone to please keep your mics muted for the duration of the presentations. Should you wish to ask a question, please utilize the chat and ask questions, concise, and also if you wish to make any contribution. So that's what our chat is there. You want to make a comment or you want to ask a question, please do so. But please remember, please close your mics until the end of this session. And now our first presentation to you is a revolutionary clip on health in Grenada.
In the area of health, like in other areas, the revolution undertook radical transformative programs centered on mobilizing collective creativity of the people. Health service emphasis was on preventative medicine at the community level, a comprehensive public health education component. This people-centered approach to healthcare was manifested in the approach to the dengue fever crisis in 1980 and the immunization of agricultural workers against tetanus during the revolutionary period. A major problem the revolution inherited was the combined effect of scarcity of doctors and substandard level of healthcare facilities. From very early in the revolution, 12 specialist doctors, including 3 dentists, were brought in from Cuba. This greatly reduced the need for medical-related travel to other islands and improved the doctor-patient ratio. Dental clinics were set up in each of the 7 parishes. A new eye clinic and fully equipped maternity unit was established at the General Hospital. Greater use was made of nurse practitioners, and a 24-hour casualty service was established at the General Hospital with 2 doctors living on the premises. Medical provision was also extended to the islands of Carriacou and Petit Martinique, with 2 resident doctors and 1 dentist, and establishment of a new health clinic. Simultaneously, scores of young people were given scholarships to study medicine overseas, particularly in Cuba. Outside the provision of free healthcare at the community level, the maternity leave law was one of the more iconic achievements of the revolution. The passage of this law, spearheaded by the National Women's Organization, protected the livelihood and postnatal health for women. It guaranteed 3 months of maternity leave with full pay, together with the right of re-employment with the same employer. The peace of mind that resulted from the job security that this law provided cannot be underestimated from a mental health and general health standpoint.
We'll now listen to a tribute to Dr. Raphael Livingston Raphael Carey John. But before we do so, we respectfully appreciate and recognize and honor the presence of his mother, Mrs. Veronica John, 95 years old, who is sitting with us today to celebrate her son's life and work with us. Over to you, John.
Like a comet blazing across the evening sky, gone too soon. Like a rainbow fading in the twinkling of an eye, gone too soon. Shining sparkling and splendidly bright, here one day, gone one night. Like the loss of sunlight on a cloudy afternoon, gone too soon.
Tribute to Dr. Raphael John. Dr. Livingston Raphael Stephen John was born on 13th April 1959 to Augustus and Veronica John. He was a member of a large family with 3 brothers and 10 sisters. He attended the St. Patrick's Darcy School and the Orientation College. He was always studious and academically brilliant. At PBC, Raphael was active in student life and well honed his social conscience, the foundation of which he got from his parents and from growing up in St. Patrick. With the advent of the Grenada Revolution, Raphael seized the opportunity to study medicine in Cuba from 1980. To his family, it was no surprise that Raphael became a surgeon. They tell the story that at 8 years old, he would be playing doctor with his sister. She would be the nurse and he the doctor. But he was not just the doctor, he was the doctor who could cut. That sister is currently a nurse in the US, and of course, Raphael became the doctor who could cut. He trained for 13 years in Cuba. Grenada had fewer than 3 years' service from this remarkable surgeon. In that short time, he saved many lives. He improved many lives. There was the young lady who seemingly died after undergoing an invasive procedure. Dr. John brought her back to life. There was the young man from St. Patrick's who had a large mass on his elbow. Dr. John removed the mass and restored his pride. Another young man from St. Patrick says he would not be alive today were it not for Dr. John. Out of gratitude, he dedicated his achievements in higher education to his savior. In fact, there are hundreds of Grenadians who he touched with the gentle and highly skilled cuts. During his short career in Grenada, he performed hundreds of operations. In naming Raphael, which in the Bible stands for He Who Heals, his parents did see something. The most remarkable story of his great work concerns an American, Mr. John Helgeson, who had the misfortune of being the victim of a robbery. In a document read by him at Dr. John's funeral, he said, "Raphael John performed a life-saving operation on me. Following it, I was sent to Miami. The doctors there marveled at his skill. The head of the trauma center brought all the other doctors in the unit to see the work done by Dr. John. He said anytime Dr. John wanted a job, just call him. After marveling at his work, the Memorial Hospital sent a letter to the then Prime Minister of Grenada expressing gratitude that such high-quality care was available in a small Caribbean island. Despite the offers of jobs outside of Grenada, Wilford never wanted to do anything but serve his people. He would constantly encourage his nurse sister to return home, since, as he would say, America would not miss a nurse, but Grenada would greatly appreciate one more. Those who knew him well, including friends from primary and secondary school, used the following words to describe him: a gifted surgeon, dedicated and committed to helping others, humble, fiercely loyal to family and friends, a total patriot. His dear mom, Veronica John, who is 96 years old, is still with us. But sadly, in 1996, at the tender age of 37, Dr. Livingston Mayfield Stephen John left us. Gone too soon, never forgotten.
Yeah. Whoa. This is for my soldiers. Real soldiers. Yeah. This is for my fallen soldiers. We miss you. Although you gone, we with you. Gone for the battlefield. Life is so real. This is for my fallen soldiers. We miss you. Although you gone, we with you. Gone for the battlefield. Life is so real.
And so I present our first speaker for the evening, Dr. George Mitchell. Dr. Mitchell will speak on translating opportunities of the revolution into service at the highest level, lessons in stewardship. Dr. George Mitchell is known to everyone. He's currently the Executive Director of the Accreditation Secretariat of the Grenada Medical and Dental Council. Prior to this assignment, he served as Chief Medical Officer in the Ministry of Health, Social Security and International Business, a position which he occupied from 2012 to 2020. Dr. Mitchell led Grenada's response to chikungunya in 2014, Zika in 2016, as well as Grenada's joint external evaluation conducted by International Health Regulation, IHR, in 2018. During this pre-retirement period in early 2020, he was recalled to spearhead the coordination of Grenada's national response to the COVID-19 pandemic. Dr. Mitchell graduated from the University of Havana, Cuba in 1990, enabling him to read and speak fluent Spanish. On completion of his MD degree, he completed a one-year internship at the General Hospital at St. George's. 2 years later, he served in the district level as a district medical officer, of course, and in 2010, he became the senior medical officer in the Ministry of Health with responsibility for chronic non-communicable diseases and primary health care. He was also responsible for providing direct supervision of the district medical officers throughout the country. He currently holds a diploma and a master's degree in dermatology from the University of Cardiff in Wales, and a master of public health from the University of St. George's University. He taught medical bioethics and physiology in the clinical skills department at St. George's University. Over the years, he has represented the Ministry of Health on several committees, including Grenada Medical and Dental Council, Allied Health Professional Council, the Pharmacy Council, the Nursing Council, and the Pesticide Control Board. Additionally, he represented the Ministry of Health on many occasions on regional bodies, including the Technical Advisory Committee of the Caribbean, Public Health Agency, CARFA, the Caribbean Accreditation Authority for Medical Education, and other professionals, and of course, the CARFA Board of Directors. He also represented Grenada on the PAHO Executive Board and was Grenada's representative and focal point for the International Health Regulations and the International Atomic Energy Agency. Apart from his current role as Executive Director of the Grenada Medical and Dental Council, Dr. Mitchell has limited private practice in his home parish of St. David's. He's a member of the COVID-19 subcommittee and has participated in several research projects and publications. He was recently awarded, and we congratulate him, the Officer of British Empire, OBE, for the contribution to the health landscape. And so I present Dr. George Mitchell.
Well, thank you, Sonia, my colleague and friend. And good afternoon to everyone on this platform. I want to begin by saying how honored and humbled I am to have been asked by the organizers of this evening's program, that is the Grenada Revolutionary Celebrations Committee and the Grenada Revolution Memorial Foundation, to have asked me to be a panelist this evening. Of course, I share this illustrious panel with my colleagues and friends from many, many years, Dr. Douglas Slater, who I met many years ago in Cuba, and of course, our own Dr. Kennedy Roberts. We go back several years. We know the topic that we're going to be discussing this evening, but I was asked to focus, as our moderator said, on a particular area, which is, of course, translating opportunities of the revolution into service at the highest level. And part B, of course, is lessons in stewardship, which I think probably is the most important aspect of, it's going to be the most important aspect of my little 10 to 15 minutes deliberations. And as I count the time, Madam Moderator, don't be afraid to stop me or indicate to me that I'm going overboard, because I have a tendency sometimes to segue into things that I don't need to segue in. Let me first attempt to briefly contextualize the period and setting me up in a way that our audience understands the opportunities that we speak about. And I hope, definitely, I hope that I don't personalize too much. This, I understand very clearly that my fellow panelists, Dr. Slater and Dr. Kennedy Roberts, will speak to, in a wider context, will speak to the contribution of Grenadian doctors and Caribbean trained doctors or West Indian trained doctors in a general sense. So I just wanted to contextualize this a little bit more, looking at the opportunities that I presented to me to be able to serve at the highest level. So yours truly grew up in a village called Malty and Content in St. David's. That village, most of you would know, is somewhat notorious, since we were the first to record a human kidnapping in Grenada. I am not going to share details about that. If anybody wants, I can update them at a subsequent time. During that period also, you know, my village had several bajons, as we call them those days. And I must note that we had plenty of Gary secret police. For a very small village, it was almost ridiculous, if you ask me, to see when 5 or 6 o'clock in the afternoon, so many of those secret police made their way up to the police station to take duties in that period. So I attended the St. David's Secondary School. Now that school is known as the St. David's Catholic Secondary School. And it was during the very, very tumultuous pre-revolutionary period of 1974 to 1979. And I don't know, some of you may be able to diagnose me, but I think it was during that period that I became a quote unquote conscious youth I may have been, my consciousness soared during that period, because as I said, it was for me the pre-revolutionary period of 79. And for those of you who don't really grasp the enormity of that period, let's not forget in 1974, we had our independence. In 1976, we had an election, and in 1979, we had the revolution, the Glorious Revolution. So that period was a very busy period. That period sort of like molded me into all that. But at the same time, I considered it an opportunity. And as such, it was almost natural for me, once the revolution took place in 1979, that I became a supporter. I became a member of the National Youth Organization, and months or years later, a member of the National Committee as well of the NYO. And so all of those provided opportunities that I seized on. In terms of the revolution creating opportunities, in 1979, months after the revolution created the Institute for Further Education, that is IFE, and several of us, very known to us, including my friend and colleague, Ruggers was in that same class, and I could mention many more of us who attended IFE at that same time. And mind you, I think more importantly, I don't remember paying a cent to go to IFE. IFE was free. That is an opportunity that I would not have let up on. That is an opportunity that I got. That is an opportunity that the revolution provided. And of course, in 1981, 2 years after 2 years of being in IFE, I got the opportunity to travel to Cuba. And of course, I embraced it with both hands. I think maybe more than hands, feet, and whatever else could embrace the opportunity to go to Cuba. I must say that my parents did not like the idea too much. But by then, I'm telling you, the consciousness that I had gained during that period deafened me to the logic of not going to Cuba. I said to them, listen, I am going, I'll see you guys sometime. It was that sort of like, that kind of moment that occurred in my life at that time. And, it was against a background where, don't forget, the propaganda was really heavy. It was against a background where my mother, I think, remember telling me, okay, go, let Fida make you married to a donkey. It was that bad. But, I was insistent, and I took the opportunity, and I went to Cuba. But even more opportunities came. About 6 weeks after I arrived in Cuba, I found myself working at the embassy. That transformation was, just undescribable. I had not one day of working experience. Before that, as I said, I went to school until 1981, and the experience from going and having to work in Cuba was at the embassy was an opportunity, was a positive opportunity that I got and I embraced. But, when I combined that opportunity and my 6 years in medical school in Cuba, I think that transformed my entire life and shaped my moral and philosophical outlook regarding people and in particular healthcare. And I think that is sort of like summarizes what has happened to George Mitchell in the future, what had happened to me going forward. And, all of that period, of course, was filled with, an empowerment, a social consciousness, and listening to Fidel and others, time and time again, emphasizing the issue of healthcare and how important that was to the Cuban people, how important education was to the Cuban people. And so that sort of like became ingrained in me. And created the person who I was. Now I returned to Cuba, to Grenada in 1990. During that period, it was a little bit better for me. I reckon a little bit better for me than for Sonia, for Dr. Nixon, who is currently chairing our program. My understanding of when you guys came back, it was that, oh, where are these people coming from? Grenadians, ordinary, coming back from Cuba, trained to be doctors. And so obviously there was this, there's brick wall being created and all of that. And, you guys created the way for me. I arrived 4 years later. It was easier and a little bit more acceptable at that time. I mean, the likes of the same David, Dr. Lambert, who we are, commemorating today his life, Carib, Raphael, Pami, Dr. the Honorable Clarice, all of you, Terry, Dr. Dubois, and so forth, who came back in dentistry, definitely paved the way and made it a lot easier for me, particularly at the level of the hospital. 2 years after I became a DMO, and I tell you what, the hospital experience was not the same as the experience that I gained or that I had at my district level. When I became DMO in my own parish, one of the things that have stuck with me forever is that when I wrote a prescription, there are a couple of times when I wrote prescriptions, and people would take my prescription and go to another doctor and say, is that okay? Is that medication okay? It was like, I felt humble, but I understand where that was. In other words, this little boy who grew up in multi and content, whose parents didn't have the opportunity to send anybody to the university, who was, jumping sea stone, pelting mangoes, playing football and cricket in the road. How come this guy is a medical doctor today and writing prescription for me to put medication in my body? That was as bad as it came, but it taught me a whole lot, and I remained very, very, very humble. The time passed, of course, as time never stops. And, by 2010, I was senior medical officer. And 2 years later, in 2012, I became the chief medical officer. And of course,
Dr. Mitchell, Dr. Mitchell, just to let you know, you have 5 minutes.
Okay, thank you. I think I should finish in 5 minutes. I'm going on to lessons learned. Of course, the position of CMO, gave me the opportunity to impact the bigger picture, while at the same time keeping it local, a real opportunity. Now, I want to focus this last half of or 5 minutes of my presentation is lessons in stewardship. And lesson 1, remaining grounded, humble, truthful to oneself, and being comfortable to who you are and with yourself. That was the biggest thing for me. I don't know how to do different. I grew up in a big family, among ordinary people. I kept it basic. That was lesson number 1. Lesson number 2, I learned to listen to others, valuing others' ideas, and at the same time, instilling confidence in them. I never felt at any time that I knew it all. I always believed that I had more to learn. And I remember from my grew-up-see days in Seventh-day Adventist Church, some verses that fiercely stayed with me. Verses like the meek shall inherit the earth. And I don't know if I wanted to inherit the earth, but I remained humble because I wanted to inherit the earth, quite frankly. And, if you remain humble, then you would see the eternal bliss. I love that. So that was lesson number 2 for me. Sonia, allow me to go to lesson number 5. Number 3 lesson that I learned was to understanding the operational environment. And quite frankly, when you when you're back in a society that you really don't know, that you never operated in, that it is important to understand where you are, understand and be able to make friends easily, quickly, respect everybody. And what I do best, I think, is to connect with the ordinary person. Before long, every single person was my friend. Even the cleaner, the groundsman, the bus driver, those are the people who I concentrated on. And of course, building relationships has been a feature of succeeding to go further. And I think it's a feature that anybody at any level should be able to embrace. Lesson number 4, learning to balance service at the local level and also twinning that with your involvement at policy making at the national, regional, and international level. And my colleague, Dr. Slater, may be able to expand on that. I think I might be just running out of time, but that is a key ingredient of succeeding and at the highest level in terms of going forward. And my 5th, I think, Sonia, I'm almost there. Building strong local, regional, and international partnerships. This has really helped me in all of my endeavors, keeping in touch with my regional colleagues, my colleagues in the international arena, and obviously twinning that with keeping your feet on the ground has allowed that success, if you want to call it, but I own all of that, guys. In concluding, let me conclude that, I just wanted to reemphasize something that I said when I made mention of my philosophical outlook transforming me, while I was in Cuba. For me, service at the highest level really, really means service to the widest cross-section of our society, especially for those who are socially and economically less empowered. So I want to close here and, of course, avail myself during the stage of the discussion for any comments or questions that anyone on the panel or any one of our listeners would share clarification on. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Dr. Mitchell. Thank you for this very complete explanation of how humility and coming from a big family. It's funny that all our honorees tonight come from quite large families. How that family environment enhances our capacity to understand need and to put ourselves in positions to serve. Thank you. And I want to remind our audience that should you have any questions for Dr. Mitchell, you may put it into the chat. And thank you very much for keeping your mics closed. I want to welcome anyone who's joined us since our start that we did not get an opportunity to welcome you. Thank you for being with us. Our second honoree is Dr. David Lambert, who was actually my classmate. And there's a lot, I think maybe David is the one who has had so much impact on our community. And tonight I want to welcome his children, his siblings, his relatives who should be present with us tonight on these platforms. Welcome to you as we recognize the work of Dr. David Lambert. Over you, John.
Like a comet blazing across the evening sky, gone too soon. Like a rainbow fading in the twinkling of an eye. night, like the loss of sunlight on a cloudy afternoon. Gone too soon.
Tribute to Dr. Raphael John. Dr. Livingston Raphael Stephen John was born on 13th April 1959 to Augustus and Veronica John.
Dr. Mr. John, I'm sorry, it's Dr. Lambert.
He attended the St. Patrick's RC School and the Presentation College. He was always studious and academically bright. The People's Doctor. Dr. David Lambert was a highly popular Cuban-trained family and sports doctor. He died of cancer on January 27, 2010, after a short illness. His untimely death sent shockwaves throughout Grenada and led to a spontaneous outpouring of affection for the man who was dubbed the People's Doctor. Stories about his dedication and generosity were legendary. For Dr. Lambert, the welfare of his patients was #1 priority. Inability to pay was never an issue, but grateful patients thanked him with ground provisions, fish, wild meat, whatever they had. He would graciously accept and then share with other patients or needy people. At the time of his death, one local newspaper eulogized him as follows: Dr. Lambert would climb the highest of hills, the biggest and steepest of steps, to look after those who required his attention as a medical doctor. Another noted that Dr. Lambert would go to the most remote areas in Grenada to deliver health care without thought of money.
You know what this form?
And fish with Dr.
Anyway, I could take
Bertrand,
please turn your phone off. Thank you.
for consideration. If you needed the care, he would give you. The issue of payment would come up after, if ever. David Lambert was born on May 14, 1958 in the Nature Island of Dominica. He was the last of 8 children. He came to Grenada in 1968 along with his family when his father took up a posting in the Office of the Director of Public Prosecution. He attended the Wesley Royal Primary School, then went on to Presentation Brothers College in 1970. At PBC, he was a first-rate student and an excellent athlete. He still holds the PBC 200-meter record of 21.3 seconds set in 1975. At the tender age of 20, David was one of the 46 men who overran the True Blue Barracks at 4 a.m. on March 13, 1979, to herald the Grenada Revolution. To those who knew him, it came as no surprise that he was prepared to make the ultimate sacrifice to liberate Grenada and create a society of opportunities for all, which was his honest perception of the mission of the revolution. In 1979, he left for Cuba to study medicine. Despite the fact that the revolution was no more by the time he returned, he never forgot the reason he became a medical doctor: to serve the people. He passionately believed that access to healthcare was a basic human right, and his practice reflected this belief.
Yeah, whoa, this is for my soldiers, real soldiers. Yeah, this is for my fallen soldiers. We miss you, I know you gone, we with you, gone for the battlefield.
So that's a tribute to him.
So real. This is for my fallen soldiers. We miss you, I know you gone, we with you, gone for the battlefield. Life is so real.
And we continue with our second presenter. Mr. Kennedy Roberts is a Grenadian health economist with over 30 years experience in that field, in both the public and the private sector. In August 1981, he went to Cuba to pursue studies in economics, but was asked to be the commercial attaché to the Grenadian embassy. And in March 1982, he returned to Grenada and became the coordinator of technical and economic collaboration between Grenada and Cuba. This task he continued until September 1983, when he went to the University of the West Indies at Cave Hill to restart his bachelor's in economics. Upon his graduation in 1987, he worked in the government services, which he did until 1994 in various capacities, including health economist and permanent secretary in the Ministry of Health and director of budget and planning in the Ministry of Finance. Between January 1994 and May 1997, he worked with the OECS Secretariat in St. Lucia as health economist before going to Boston University to pursue a master's degree in public health. From September 1998 to June 2021, he was employed to St. George's University and was instrumental in establishing the Master of Public Health program, which is now fully accredited. He has been a member of the Grenada Senate from 2008 to 2009 and has been involved as a board member in several organizations, including chairman of the National Insurance Board, of the Grenada Planned Parenthood Association, of the Caribbean Family Planning Affiliation, of Grenada Public Health Association, and he's been on the board of GrenLec. He recently started an agri-tourism small business offering garden-to-table culinary experiences featuring local cuisine. With pleasure, I welcome my dear friend, Mr. Kennedy Roberts, to make his presentation.
Thank you, Dr. Nixon, and it is a pleasure to be here with you and other colleagues, Dr. Slater and Dr. Mitchell, my colleagues who we go back, I don't count in years now, it's 4 decades plus. I was, as Dr. Nixon indicated, in my early days, spent some time in Cuba. But interestingly, my first visit to Cuba was while at the IFE in 1981, when Prime Minister Bishop selected 3 of us to go to do some preliminary work in what was supposed to be piloting, because the revolution was supposed to get a plane, and I was one of those selected to go and do piloting. But my mother wasn't too happy with that direction, and by the time I left in August 81, the decision was to do economics. However, because of my relationship with Prime Minister Bishop and so on, because my aunt was married to his uncle, the Lagrenades, and as a result, we had a close relationship. And one day, while at Machurucutu doing that initial foundation Spanish, Donald MacPhail, the first secretary at the embassy, came up at the time. We didn't have all this communication we have now, and said, I have to come down to the embassy, that I was called by the PM and, wondered what's going on. And I was asked at the tender age of 19 to work at the embassy, and became the youngest diplomat of the revolution, probably the youngest diplomat officially in the world. You never know. But that experience really molded me into who I am today. And in dealing with the technical collaboration program, I had the opportunity to go back and forth a lot to Cuba, preparing the work, collaboration between the 2 countries during that period. And I remember distinctly in 1993, in June, the Cuban delegation came to Grenada, and we prepared a draft. And the plans for Grenada was tremendous. I remember distinctly that the workers on the airport were supposed to remain here for some other period of time, where some heavy focus on infrastructural development was planned. And the Cuban health workers were an integral part of the assistance program. So speaking today and in the preparation of this little presentation over the last couple of weeks, it really brought back very strong emotions in terms of my memory of that period. And when we remember 1979, the context of the world was the Alma Ata Declaration, the Alma Ata Conference took place in September 1978, where the World Health Organization and UNICEF came together, and the World Health Organization, and they had this conference looking at healthcare at the global level. And it was at this conference, the Alma Ata Declaration promoted the concept of primary health care. They made it quite clear that the approach needed to address the problems of health in the world must be done at the community level, must be done at a level where the focus is on prevention rather than curing someone when they get sick. It was at that conference that the concept of health as a fundamental human right was advocated. And it was based on the premise of practical, scientifically sound, essential healthcare, which was socially acceptable. And that concept of universality and what the world is promoting now as universal health coverage was an integral part of what Cuba did at the time. The state of the health sector at the time in Grenada was one where we came out of a period of Gayism, and there was not much focus on the health sector during that time. We had very limited numbers of doctors, and more so very few local doctors in our system. There was a lack of basic medical supplies and services at the community level, and there were limited access throughout the country for health services. So the revolution was faced with a situation where they had to almost start from scratch in addressing the health needs of the Grenadian population. And interestingly, the first health minister during the revolution was Prime Minister Maurice Bishop. He took on the responsibility for health based on the priority that was placed. And when we listen to a lot of the economic presentations, the budget presentations, the budget consultations that took place, the concept of increasing the social wage of the people was an integral part of that policy of the revolution. And by increasing the social wage, it simply meant reducing the out-of-pocket expenditure for things like health and education, social services, so that every person, every individual has the same right based on their ability, based on their need. And as a result, that social wage was considered a foundation in terms of what the benefit of the people of Grenada. Now, the presentation has asked me to look at the Cuban health system and see how the revolution sort of tried to model what was taking place in the Cuban healthcare system. And you know, I know I'm preaching to the choir, but the 1959 revolution in Cuba was a period again when the revolutionary government met a health system in disarray. There was one university hospital. The private sector was the dominant deliverer of healthcare services. Most of the medical practitioners were based in Havana. Very limited community health services, a very centralized Ministry of Public Health. And in the early days of the revolution, the focus was heavily on the basic needs, the sanitation, immunization, speaking to the people, starting to gather data, understanding what was taking place. So in that early period, they also focused a lot on education and training. That was a period when also a lot of the doctors in Cuba migrated to the US after the revolution. And of course, we know that the impact of the embargo with limited resources available to the Cuban population. So that early period was difficult, of course. However, but by the end of the 1970s and into the early 80s, with Cuba being one of the countries that was actively involved in the Alma Ata conference, the whole concept of primary healthcare was brought to another level in Cuba. And that's when the heavy focus on family medicine was the dominant policy at that time. The goal to have a physician and a nurse in every block was met by the early 1990s, and the ratio of doctors to the population is 1 to 1,000. Each doctor see about 150 plus families in their community. And that whole concept of family medicine is the core of the Cuban health system that has allowed them to have a health status comparable to countries that spend significantly more on their healthcare system. They focus heavily on the surveillance system. Cuba has shown the world through its data that they are doing something right. Of course, for many years, there were a lot of cynicism about the data, and they said that it's been made up. But the Cuba surveillance system is such that within almost immediately of something happening, they're able to share that information at different levels. And by the end of March in every year, you're almost certain to have the statistics for the previous year properly documented. And the data has consistently shown that with the level of expenditure Cuba is making on healthcare, it makes a big difference in terms of your cost of healthcare and the quality of life of your people. Cuba spends around 15–17% of their GDP on health, and that is significantly more than most countries of the world. Most of the developed world spend between 9 and 12%, and countries like Grenada barely spends about 7% of their GDP. And this is one of the areas investing in health and investing in prevention really generate a lot of dividends down the road. In recent times, in the last several decades too, Cuba has also focused heavily on the biotechnology development, pharmaceuticals in particular. And that is why Cuba has been able to produce vaccines to address a lot of their childhood diseases, other health problems. And in recent times, the COVID vaccines has been rated among one of the most effective in addressing the COVID pandemic. So the Cuban health system, therefore, in summary, focused heavily on prevention, focused heavily on family medicine, focused heavily on communication, data, surveillance gathering, and leadership, competent leadership. So you would never find a chief medical officer in Cuba who is not public health trained. And this is one of the things, having the right people in the right positions is an integral part in terms of having success in your healthcare system. So what is the current situation then that the revolution focused on in 79? We heard what the Cuban health system focused on, and as you would expect, in 1979, just after the Alma Ata conference, primary health care was taken up as a mantra for the revolution. Of course, the state played the dominant role. Unlike Cuba, where the state controls the health system almost exclusively based on their reality, in the Grenada reality, the state also had to work in conjunction with the private sector to address the health system. But the approach to primary health care was heavily emphasized, and the whole strengthening of the health system, the need to decentralize the healthcare system, having the St. Patrick's Medical Complex being opened during the revolution was a clear indication of the approach. So to have polyclinics, and that's one of the things the Cuban health system did. They had a lot of polyclinics and healthcare facilities, hospitals at the community level, and that contributed in a big way to improving the access. During the revolution also, the whole concept of economic and social development going hand in hand was an integral part of the approach. So addressing the issue of poverty through improving the social wage was a strategy that was heavily used. Also the approach appreciating the intersectoral significance in terms of the factors that contribute to your health status, what they call the social determinants of health. They saw things like housing, education, agriculture, those sort of sectors had a big role to play in terms of education. So things like the Grenada Food and Nutrition Council was established to really create that link between agriculture and health. And up to today, the GFNC plays a very important role in monitoring what is happening, especially with regards to children. The issue of sports, was also an integral part of that intersectoral approach. We all know that the way in which the community handled the beautification of the community, going out on weekends and clean the place, that made a big impact. And as was mentioned in the introduction, the 1980 dengue outbreak really heightened the importance of community participation and really led to the efforts throughout the revolution of communities very involved in keeping their communities clean. Nowadays,
Kennedy, you have 2 minutes.
Okay, so what has happened now, the plans of the revolution in terms of health, there was a very detailed health plan that was implemented with focus on family health. The objective of having doctors come back from Cuba was supposed to strengthen that family component of our health system. But unfortunately, by the time our doctors started to come back, our health system was not given primary health care the sort of priority. Right now, we have very little confidence in our health system. Our hospital services in a terrible state. We have poor data collection and surveillance system. Our health workers are demoralized. The issues of domestic violence and child abuse is still a dominant in our society. And when we think of the programs of the revolution, we're almost guaranteed that the sort of things that are happening now would not be part, because the whole focus on primary health care, the whole focus on physical, mental, and social well-being was there. So where do we go from here? What do we need? We need knowledgeable, adaptable team players to lead our health system. We need to improve the quality of care provided at the community level to make the population confident of going to a health center. We need to improve our communication system, our data collection system, our use of technology. We need to have greater intersectoral collaboration and really have that life cycle approach as an integral part, meaning the under fives are given special attention, the school's health system, the adolescent care, the workers' health, the elderly care, and really look at the delivery of care. And of course, the focus on mental health is critical. So in conclusion, then, we see that the core of the Cuban health system was in a great way replicated in during the Grenada Revolution. And the collapse of the revolution led to the collapse of our healthcare system. And 40 years later, we're still talking about doing the things that we had started so effectively during the revolution. And I must say, in doing this report, there was very little documented out there about health during the revolution. There's several documents on education, on women, on agriculture, but I realized that one documented evidence on health during the revolution was missing. So I want to thank Dr. Nixon and the committee for inviting me to participate. There's some more I wanted to go into about the cost of healthcare and healthcare financing, because that's an integral part, but I will end here and take any questions later as needed. Thank you very much.
Galaxy 822, please hang up your phone. Galaxy 822, please turn off your microphone. Thank you. And thank you, Mr. Roberts. Thank you very much. I feel like we're suspended. I feel like we're still in 1983, that all the things that have been started are still waiting there to be put into place. I see some of my Jamaican friends, and like they say, it's never too late for a shower of rain. Whither go the Grenada Revolution? Last week I reminded us that the revolution is not dead; it's just in a different phase. So whither go the Grenada Revolution? And now we're going to recognize our third honoree, who was also my classmate in primary school, Dr. Winston Tomo Thomas. And again, I'd like to welcome his family. I heard his sister Wilma saying that she was present, and all of his relatives and nephews, whoever are here today, we welcome you to this and thank you for being here. We thank, as we thank Tomo for his work. So our tribute to Dr. Winston Tomo Thomas. Go, John, your turn. Are you there, John?
Gone too soon. Shining, sparkling, and splendidly bright. Here one day, gone one night. Like the loss of sunlight on a cloudy afternoon. Gone too soon.
A tribute to Dr. Winston Thomas. Dr. Winston Tommy Thomas was born on 12th July 1960 into a large nuclear family with 14 siblings and a larger extended family with scores of cousins, uncles, and aunts. In the large family setting, plus countless friends in the Carenage community, he was a very sociable person from a young age. His formative educational path comprised of invaluable encouragement and nurturing from within his family, and attendance at the Gospel Hall Connected Kindergarten, affectionately then known as Teacher Blanche School. There, Winston, like his older and younger siblings, had the fortunate experience of a profoundly principled and structured educational program blended with Christian ethics. That combination, as Teacher Blanche made clear, was indispensable to producing responsible, productive, God-fearing young men and women. After preschool, Winston moved on to the St. George's Anglican Primary School, affectionately dubbed Hainsey School, and later on to the Grenada Boys Secondary School. He was a solid student at all levels of his education. At the GBSS, he pursued subjects at O and A level, which laid the foundation for his later medical education. Winston was also a talented sportsman. He represented Grenada at the under-19 youth cricket level, was Grenada's junior table tennis champion, and played football for GBSS. With the advent of the Grenada Revolution, he was afforded the opportunity to study medicine in Cuba. Although the revolution experienced its tragic demise before he completed his studies, Winston never wavered in his commitment to return home to provide dedicated service to his country. From the day of his return in 1989 until his untimely death, Dr. Winston Thomas served with dedication and distinction. No hour of the day or night was too early or too late to call him. No place in Grenada was too far for him to go to deliver medical services, although he didn't own a vehicle. For Dr. Thomas, material things held little or no value compared with his passion to serve, even without a private practice. The outpouring of affection when the sad news of his passing reached Grenada was indicative of his impact. Fully matured men and women openly wept on hearing the news. He was such a fixture at the emergency wing of the General Hospital that the widely held view is that the ER ought to be renamed in his honor. In addition to his medical practice, Dr. Thomas was an unwavering political advocate for the poor and disadvantaged. His voice was a staple on the various radio programs as he pleaded the cause of the poor and voiceless. Dr. Thomas was also a member of several organizations, including Friends of the Earth, Grenada Chapter, the Grenada-Cuba Friendship Society, the Grenada-Venezuela Friendship Society, the Grenada Revolution Memorial Foundation, and the Public Workers Union.
Yeah. Whoa. This is for my soldiers. Real soldiers. Yeah, this is for my fallen soldiers. We miss you. I know you can't be with you. Can't find the battlefield. Life is so real. This is for my fallen soldiers. We miss you. I know you can't be with you. Can't find the battlefield. Life is so real.
as we reflect on these dedications to our fallen colleagues, one thing seems to ring through, that Cuba was able to take really good elements and create perfect compounds, so necessary for the development of our territories. This next speaker will reflect just how far children from working class families got as a result of the exposure and opportunities that were received in Cuba. And I will introduce our final speaker, Dr. Douglas Slater, known as Dougie to all of us. Dr. Douglas Wilbert Slater assumed the position of Assistant Secretary General, Directorate of Human and Social Development of the Caribbean Community, that is CARICOM Secretariat, on 1st of October 2013. His portfolio included health, education, gender, youth, culture, crime, environment / sustainable development, crime and security. Well, that sounds like CARICOM to me, but what can I tell you? National of St. Vincent and the Grenadines and a medical doctor by profession, Dr. Slater was the Minister of Foreign Affairs, Foreign Trade and Consumer Affairs of St. Vincent and the Grenadines from 2010 to 2013. In that capacity, he also served as representative of St. Vincent and the Grenadines to the ACP EU Parliamentarians Group, and as alternate for Prime Minister and Minister of Finance on the Caribbean Development Bank and the Eastern Caribbean Central Bank authorities. Dr. Slater served as Minister of Health and the Environment in St. Vincent and the Grenadines from 2001 to 2010, and was the CARICOM Minister of Health designated to negotiate the regional approach with the Global Fund to fight AIDS, TB, and malaria during the establishment of the Global Fund. He also served as chairman of the Organization of Eastern Caribbean States Regional Coordination Mechanism, and Dr. Slater was honored by the CARICOM community. Additionally, Dr. Slater chaired the executive committee of PAHO and was involved in discussions regarding how the now established CARPHA, or Caribbean Public Health Agency. Earlier in his career, he pursued a master's in public health degree and served as public health physician in several communities in Jamaica during the emergence of HIV as a regional and global public health challenge. He also contributed significantly to revamping the immunization practices that resulted in improved coverage. He further served as a public health physician in a UNDP USAID Government of Jamaica Typhoid Control Project between 1992 and 1994. The project succeeded in controlling the spread of typhoid. Subsequently, he was appointed Medical Officer Health in St. Vincent and the Grenadines and focal point person for HIV/AIDS. He has served in other senior management positions of the government, guiding national health policy issues during the emergence of the HIV/AIDS disease. He also served as disaster coordinator for the Ministry of Health within the National Disaster Management System, where he functioned as co-manager in national simulation exercises. Dr. Slater has also been a part-time lecturer in a drug addiction course offered by the UE local campus and gave several public lectures on various topics. The importance of a proper functioning health system as experienced in Cuba, where he pursued his initial basic medical degree, stoked Dr. Slater's interest and passion in health and in public health in particular. This was particularly important working in a resource-scarce environment as we have here in the OECS. And without much ado, I'd like to welcome our final speaker for the evening, Dr. Douglas Slater.
Thank you very much, Sonia, and other colleagues who presented today. I really want to join with my preceding colleagues in extending congratulations to the organizers of this important event. I also want to say thanks for inviting me And I feel humbled, but I also am happy that I was invited. And I want to say that as a non-Grenadian, but a Caribbean man, I know some of my colleagues from Grenada will hang on to the Grenadines thing, but we'll talk about it after. But seriously, I wish to pay a special welcome to the wider Caribbean participants, and I know there are several of our colleagues on this activity now. So thank you for participating. So I was asked to address the issue of the contribution of Cuba to Grenada and the wider Caribbean in its health sector, and to address issues of sustainable partnership in healthcare delivery and the contribution of Cuban doctors or Cuban trained doctors. Now, Kennedy has helped me a lot, and a lot of what Kennedy has presented really is applicable to my presentation. So to that extent, I can move even faster. So I want to present in a few distinct areas. One, the training of healthcare professionals for the Caribbean by the Cuban people. Two, the supplementation of the national health services with healthcare professionals by Cuba. Three, provision of tertiary or higher level health care procedures to persons from the Caribbean, and the provision of technical and allied health services to the Caribbean. So the training of Caribbean, non-Cuban Caribbean persons in Cuba began before the revel. It began somewhere in the mid-70s. I remember that definitely, because I recall in 1976, the bombing of the Cubana airline in Barbados. I was a student at the University of the West Indies there, and most of you will know that there were several Guyanese heading towards Cuba to study. And many of us will also know one, and this is going a little away from it, but important, one doctor, Dr. Chesney, who actually missed that flight. So he was lucky, but we won't go into details on that now. So I know it was then. And then came the revel. And the revolution in '79 actually paved the way for many of us out of Grenada to realize our dreams, to get the opportunities that you have heard of from Mitch and from Kennedy. My story is not significantly different, and the stories of many of us here participating, the story is very similar. So as of 1980, we start having students going from Grenada, and I think the first batch in 80, Antigua and Barbuda, Dominica, St. Lucia, and St. Vincent. Most of us there, it was interesting that in that time, the scholarships were initially offered to governments, but you have heard of the geopolitical situation then mentioned earlier by my colleagues, did not make it easy for governments to accept. And so those of us who did were seen as some sort of brave people to go to Cuba to study then. And most of us had certain political connections to progressive parties in the region. Then we must say over the years, more students began going, some governments became a little more progressive and realized the importance of partnership with Cuba. to provide the health care workers that they so badly needed and still do. And that continues. I don't have detailed figures over the years, but I can tell you that up to 2020, some 5,900 Caribbean students have graduated from, in the healthcare sector, have graduated from Cuban universities. Mainly doctors, but also some nurses. And currently, as we speak, there are approximately 800 students from the Caribbean studying in Cuba. Now, as a sidebar, just do some math. Kennedy can help us here. The average annual cost of a medical student per year is about $40,000 US. By 4 or 5 years, by 5,000 doctors, you're talking about, and you do that cost, you'll see it reaches quite a penny. If you really average one student at $500,000 EC dollars, it shows that training from the Cuban government has contributed to the region well over 2.5 billion, or let's round it off to 1 billion US dollars over the decades. Important figure to note. But added to that, we must add the value of the services of Cuban doctors that have served us over the many years at different levels, and also the services received by Caribbean patients going to Cuba. So we know that initially and mainly the training was for general doctors and then later specialty. And one of our comrades that was commemorated today, Carib, was I think among the first, if not the first, who went for specialist studies in Cuba, and he did surgery. Now, later, due to global shortages and regional shortages in nurses, I can tell you that Cubans started to train our nurses. And I know about that because by then I was Minister of Health and St. Vincent and the Grenadines, and we recognized what was happening. We couldn't keep up with, we didn't have enough, and we had to restart our national training, and we sent over 30 students to study nursing. Now, it is important to note that how important it is to have not just a Dougie Slater, but someone who understand the policies and the way the Cuban approach, as very well explained by Kennedy, at policy level making. And we were fortunate, the region has been fortunate to have had several ministers of government, including ministers of health, that have helped in following the pattern of the Cuban health system to better serve the region. We know of in St. Kitts, in Dominica, etc. The Cuban healthcare professionals in Caribbean. Now, that is Cuban doctors coming to the Caribbean. That started in 1980s, and it was mainly a specialist help to when Guyana established a medical school, and it was also to help in training of interns, myself being one of them, and the Guyanese, it was mainly for Guyanese trained and doing their internship in the Caribbean. Guyana had that facility, and I know two other colleagues who might be on this chat now from St. Lucia, Dr. St. Rose and Dr. Louisi. We three of us did our internship in Guyana then. By the beginning of the 21st century, that is 2000, a notable immigration of Caribbean healthcare personnel that is leaving our shores. I mean, and that started earlier too. Our governments realized that the health system just couldn't hold up. So we had to establish partnerships with the Cuban, despite some of the politics, but by then, the political environment has been changing because, as I stated earlier, there were now parties, progressive parties, with members of consisting of persons who studied in Cuba and was sympathetic to that those policy initiatives. So we started to train, as I said, nurses, and then later Cuban healthcare workers. We started to bring the Cubans to the islands, and well, not just islands, because we have South American territories of Guyana, Belize. We had the healthcare workers, again, they helped to establish the partnership and to carry out all the policies, which I won't go into because Kennedy well enunciated the issue of the Alma Ata Declaration of 78 and Health for All by 2000 and so on. And it was good to know that, having studied in Cuba, and as Sonia said in my short bio, I became passionate about primary health care, having studied in Cuba, because, you know, the primary health care physicians are the Cinderellas of the specialties. Some people don't think it is very important, but I can tell you, the best spent dollar on healthcare is in primary healthcare. And we all see what is happening has happened over the years and what is happening now, including the importance of immunization, etc. Now, apart from personnel, and as I said, I didn't go into the numbers, but we all know that almost every single CARICOM member state has brought Cubans or Cuban-trained doctors into their services, and at times they form the majority of the students, of the healthcare workers. But apart from personnel, because we're talking healthcare systems, and not, which is just more than doctors and nurses and dentists, the Cubans also help member states in the region with biomedical technicians to help service and maintain valuable equipment. And you know how important that is? We all know how good the Cubans are at keeping, quote unquote, old things going. I can tell you, as minister in St. Vincent, we had some literal tons of old equipment, ultrasound machine, X-ray machine, all sorts of things parked up for this to be discarded that were brought back to life by the Cubans biotechnicians. And why did I mention that? It is important. It saves a lot of money for, from buying other equipment. So tertiary healthcare service to Caribbean people. We all know that many of us, especially us in the OECS, we have lacked and still do to some extent high-level tertiary care, where you do sophisticated, we don't have certain specialists or specialist facilities. And the Cubans have helped in our healthcare system by treating many of our citizens gratis in that respect. And I want to highlight, they have treated persons with various cancers, specialized surgeries, orthopedics, etc., and specialized pediatric surgery. I want to highlight what we call in St. Vincent Vision Now. It was Mission Miracle Mission or Mission Milagro, where thousands of persons went to Cuba and get their sight, their vision improved, and some from totally blind to being able to see. I think as a segue, I would like to commend the importance and this partnership. That's what I'm talking about, of the government of Venezuela. President Maduro during that time, and followed by Chavez and then Maduro, assisted in this program by providing airlift to Cuba for Caribbean persons. I mentioned already about the the biomedical, but they also provide other technicians. They actually provided also equipment, such as dialysis machines and colonoscopy services, etc. in some countries. I can tell you for sure, I benefited from that in St. Vincent and the Grenadines. Now, some other services that I think are not well known about, that I just mentioned briefly. CARICOM and Cuba, as you know, have established some very historical ties. And just recently, I think it was 2018 at the summit, a decision was made to establish a center for the training of teachers for persons with disabilities in Guyana to service the region. This center is actually already established. Unfortunately, it took some time, and when it was about to unfold, then came COVID, and you know what, people couldn't travel, etc. But I hope that persons out there can pay some attention to that, because it is said that the society is judged on the interest it pays and its most vulnerable, its elderly and disabled persons. And Cuba has seen that and is helping us to adopt that policy. Again, in the wider Caribbean, we know of the sending of many Cuban doctors in the times of disaster, the time when we most need it. Hurricanes, earthquakes, cholera. In Haiti, for example, in 2006, there were 426 healthcare workers sent by Cuba. And also in the hurricanes and the outbreak of cholera there. Then, but it's not just sending. What was the outcome? One example, between 1999 and 2003, the infant mortality rate in Haiti moved from 59.4 to 33 out of every 1,000 live births. These are important because, as Kennedy will know, health development indices are linked to issue these statistics. And that's all, those are some of the indirect benefits of the Cuban help to the region. Also, the 800,000 children are vaccinated in Haiti between 2001 and 2002. I must recognize the assistance of the French and Japanese government who provided funds and vaccines for that program. I'm getting to the end. Apart from that, though, we know of the Henry Rees unit, which some of them have. That is a unit of healthcare workers that Cuba established in 2005, and it has responded to many of our member states in times of disaster, including the current time of COVID. And currently, I think there are about over 100 health workers in Belize. And you'll notice I'm going right through the CARICOM member states where Cuban help has helped us, has been deployed. The OECS, in fact, during this COVID outbreak, the Cuban government has deployed 473 Cuban healthcare workers in that same brigade, the Henry Brigade, to serve the OECS countries, Barbados, Jamaica, and Belize. And we know how much that would have helped to alleviate the stress of our healthcare workers in our member states. Additionally, something that is not yet very well known, the Cuban government has just recently, in fact, it's somewhere in February, offered a donation of 72,000 vaccines for COVID-19, the Soberania and the Abdala vaccines. What is important here is that they also contain pediatric formulation, and those are difficult to procure right now. There's a little hitch. The Cuban vaccines are yet to be formally approved by the WHO, and to some extent that has impacted on the acceptance of them. But another help to the regional health system that Cuba has provided is the availability of a special product called Herboprot P. And many member states have been using it. It is a treatment for diabetic foot ulcers, chronic diabetic foot ulcers. And we know how important it is. That is in the region. We are one of the most heavily impacted areas in terms of diabetes mellitus, that is sugar, otherwise known as sugar. And one of its big complications is amputation of limbs, especially legs, due to uncontrolled. And that impacts on the standard of living, productivity, and so many other socioeconomic variables of individuals and hence nations. Now, so basically, that is just a screenshot of the ways in which the Cubans have partnered with us and the importance of partnership with a country. And it must be remembered that all of this, the context in which Cuba has helped us in this, is that they are under a blockade. They would have been able to do very much more. And I want to use the opportunity as I end in thanking the government of Cuba through the ambassador who is here, president, on behalf of all of us in CARICOM for the services that they have continued to render to us. I know the heads of the OECS have done so on repeated occasions. I know the heads of CARICOM have been very supportive and repeat that support to Cuba. But I want to appeal to us now on this session. We too can do our part. I know many of us have contributed when Cuba really had a critical and urgent need with COVID, and I applaud you for that. But I want us to go further than that. I want at every opportunity you may have, we can contribute to the economy of Cuba by visiting and spending some money in the tourism sector. I think, among other things, if we want to do other individual ways of repaying what we have earned from the hard work of the Cubans, we are all open to do that. So let me again thank you, and remember that Cuba, viva Cuba, viva Caribbean, viva la revolución, and remember that partnership. I saw somebody earlier put up a sticker that teamwork is dream work, or address something like teamwork makes dreams work. And let us work as a team. Cuba is a strong partner in this team in the relationship with Caribbean and CARICOM. Thank you for the opportunity. And I am available for any questions that may be asked. Thank you very much.
Well, thank you, Dr. Slater. Remember, I was a teaching assistant. Don't forget that. So I was in Cuba long before you, okay? Thank you very much. Very thought-provoking, but reminding us that even if we have our own individual experiences, that the experience of Cuba's support for health in the Caribbean has been very integrative. I think one thing we forgot that many of us married Cubans, and so increased the level of professionals that came back to our islands and our countries to work within the healthcare service and within other areas. So we thank you. You know, the contribution is undeniable. And through dignified yet quiet sacrifice, the Cuban people made us all better. They created equity, an environment of equity for all of us who are looking to get ahead in our lives, not just as individuals, but to come back home and be working patriots, to come to our countries and serve the people who most needed, the most vulnerable, Dr. Slater's favorite group of people. So we thank the Cubans again, and I want to thank all our speakers. I'm going to invite you this time, I remind you more or less, to please put your comments, your questions, whatever you have, because our speakers will shortly be addressing any questions, extending anything they would have liked to say in their in their discourse. So thank you, Dr. Slater. Thank you, Dr. Mitchell, and thank you, Mr. Kennedy, for your support and for ensuring that this evening's, the discourses that you brought enlightened our knowledge, stimulated a little bit of thought, and gives us something to take forward as we aim to build our health systems. And again, I want to take you up on the fact that we really need to support Cuba. What we can do is visit. They're happy to see us come back home because for them, we've always been family, and for that, we're thankful to the Cuban people. At this point, we're going to invite questions. I will invite Mrs. Valerie Williams to chair this session on where we'd have an interactive session where questions that are posed into the chat will be addressed. But first, I'd like to ask our speakers whether there's anything else they'd like to say. Kennedy, I'm sure I heard you say that there was something that you think you would like to see as a health economist, and I think this is a good time because cost of care is very, very important. So I'd like to invite Kennedy to make 2 minutes to expand on his discourse. Thank you, Ken.
Thank you, Dr. Nixon. As we all know, healthcare is very expensive, especially when it comes to curative care. And one of the successes of the Cuban health system is the ability to achieve a tremendous amount with very little financial resources. Again, it is no secret that the approach is focused on prevention, focused on education, focusing on ensuring that the access to tertiary, secondary care is there. And these are some of the things that the revolution tried to promote and put in place to ensure that over time, the costs of the Grenadian health system would also be low compared to our resources. The reality is we've gone way back, where the reality now is that a lot of people have difficulty affording to pay for healthcare services. And we've reached a stage where a lot of people would be literally going around with a donation sheet and motorcades and so on, asking for support. And we really have to give consideration to the National Health Insurance program that has been discussed for 20 plus years. We have heard that the NIS can play a greater role in providing care, but then in the last several years, we've been promised that a new model is going to be presented and implemented. We have not had the detailed discussion as a population, much less to have it implemented at this stage. So one of the things we really have to look at is how can we reduce the burden on families, on individuals to access care? And the role of our Cuban trained doctors was something that the revolution had hoped would focus on that family medicine, focus on prevention, and really have that impact. Unfortunately, we're not there. So I just to highlight that. Thank you.
Thank you, Kennedy. Is there anything you want to emphasize, Dr. Mitchell? Anything else you'd like to share?
Yes. Dr. Nixon, yes, definitely so. I said.
For a second, Dr. Mitchell, just ask ZTE BLA 20059, please. Thank you.
Yeah, I was saying that during my little discourse that I kind of focused on the opportunities that that I was given to serve at the highest level. But that is not akin to me. I think there were several Grenadians in the healthcare system. And we are celebrating Raphael and David, as well as Winston, Tommy. But we have several others, maybe more importantly, playing roles at the national level every single day that that adds to the whole sort of like environment that Cuba has afforded Cuban graduates, Grenadian attending medical school in Cuba, to bring to the Grenadian population, and those should not go unnoticed, really. You know, you may have one person sort of like highlighted out there, but the vast, we have had, you know, close to maybe on rough calculation, 250 Grenadians who have studied in Cuba and are providing healthcare at different levels. And so we must not forget the contribution. Without them, I don't think our population would be where we are right now. And yes, may I just say that, yes, I served that as chief medical officer, but let's not forget that Dr. Sean Charles, who sort of like succeeded me, is also a Cuban trained, and Dr. Taisha Donald, who is who is at the head of the hospital, they are also Cuban trained. And we have so many persons at different levels in the society among our healthcare workforce who are Cuban trained. I really cannot anticipate, I cannot make the deduction what our healthcare system would have been without these folks. And when I say healthcare system, I want to be totally inclusive, because dental care is also important. So, and we have so many practitioners at the level of dental care who are, who are playing a key and vital role, heading departments and all of that. Dr. Kins Douglas, Marcia, Rennie, Julie Dubois, and a lot of people would argue that your health starts with your mouth. What you eat, blah, blah, blah. But those are really, really important contributions to the healthcare system in Grenada that we would not like to lose our focus on. So I just wanted to sort of make that point here. Thank you.
And thank you very much, Dr. Mitchell, for destacando, for bringing to the fore the fact that many others of us have served at the highest level simply because we are motivated to do so by our training. Thank you very much.
Yep.
Dr. Slater, the floor is yours.
Yes, thank you very much. I appreciate this time to add a few comments. I have been reading some of the comments in the chat too, and thank you to those who have commented. I gave some figures about the cost, and I would like to give a challenge to Kennedy as a health economist. It would be useful to try to attempt to put it in dollars, the contribution of direct and indirect, and the various personnel in our territory. Right. So I think somebody has a mic on. Sean? Hello.
Hey, Ronald.
Yeah.
Please turn the mic off.
No, and talking about opportunities, we have heard from earlier, our comrades, our fallen comrades, and I know many of us come from very large and poor families. But it's not only about those of us who come from poor families. There were limited opportunities, even for those who, were not in that category to study medicine. I can tell you that at a personal level, when I went to Cuba, those days, most OECS countries were only allowed 2 medical students to the University of the West Indies, our own indigenous medical school. Then came, I know things changed a little with the establishment of St. George's Medical, but not very many of us could have afforded that anyway. And I was actually admitted to UE twice before I went to Cuba to study medicine. And on both occasions, basically, I couldn't because I couldn't afford it. And that I know happened with many of us, if not most of us. And I really gave that personal experience to show how important it was that to link the revolution created that opening for us to go to Cuba. So while we thank the Cubans, but we also thank our comrades from Grenada for making that little opening for us. And on another personal note, not personal, I saw in the chat about, and Mitch did mention about people querying the quality of the product. You know, we all are sufficiently alert to the geopolitics and propaganda, negative propaganda, and that still happens around. And there's always these people watching you and wondering if the Cuban train. However, we should know WHO
working with
the quality
university.
of the Cuban health system. And
I think up to last year.
Yeah, please,
Hey, what was my
somebody
number?
just please mute your mics, colleagues.
Hold on, Dougie. Ronald, would you please close your mic?
Thank you. Yes, as I was saying, the WHO and many other international bodies have validated the quality of Cuba's health system, especially the public and primary health care. It is the one, if not the most outstanding. And you know, sometimes we take things for granted, and we must be assertive and let people know these things. Do you know, how many of us know that the Congress of the United States had to, after they have put on their embargo, the Cubans developed a vaccine, right? A meningitis vaccine for children. That was, many thousands of people were dying. And the American government had to adjust some legislation to work. I think it was either GlaxoSmithKline or Merck to market it, the Cuban biotechnology that was mentioned earlier.
GlaxoSmithKline.
Right. You know, these things we need to know. And we know about so many other, the treatment for antivirals that they have developed. And they continue with this partnership, helping us in the region. We happen to have access most of the time, either at subsidized rate or even gratuitously. And we must continue to thank our Cuban colleagues for that. I remember about dental services. Suppose I tell you that I did a filling in Cuba from 1981 in Machurucutu. And I tell you why I'm mentioning this. For those of us who don't know, Machurucutu, it was a little community, rural, very rural community where we did our language training. Some of us did our language training there. It was far away, as people say, home behind God back. It was in the middle of a farm, cattle field. And that community had tertiary level healthcare. Because most of us, even today in the Caribbean, most of us, if we have a dental thing to do, have to go to the city. And I could remember doing a filling there that still exists about 40 years now, over 40. And I know persons who went to Cuba and did filling where they were told they have to extract it at home. The Cubans said, no, ma, we could save this. And they did it. I am giving these details to show the validation and how good the standard of healthcare in Cuba. And I think these are little things we must take some note of and remember when we get the pushback. But many of us have been able to push back. I can tell you that there was an attempt, there were many countries that were querying having some challenges with accreditation of the medical degree. And luckily, some of us were there as ministers to push back from that level. Like, so it's important that we understand all these and to see how these partnerships link in the whole movement of things. Thank you.
Well, thank you, Dr. Slater, for that appendix, because I think it does bring into focus even more the equity, the situation of equity, the condition of equity that were allowed to people, you know, by simply breaking a glass ceiling. So many of us were able to go to medical school and to contribute to the well-being, and that we still have that responsibility to show that where we come from is a good place, and the things we bring are great for our beneficiaries. Thank you so much. Val, I'm going to hand over to you to take over this.
Thank you very much, Sonia, and special greetings to all the presenters this evening, and thanks for your presentations. We have at this point revolutionary greetings, of course, to everybody who is present here this evening as we celebrate our 43rd anniversary of the revolution. We have to manage the question time a bit because we have to bring on the Cuban ambassador to speak. We've gone a little bit beyond the time he was scheduled to come on, but we can make up for that in the informal session for those of you who really want to ask questions. After the formal session is over, we will allow for, a question and answer and interaction. So let me just read two comments quickly. A neglected area of the medical care throughout the Caribbean is for our geriatric cohort. I would like this to be addressed because we really need to help the caregivers and the elderly. So that was one question, one comment. And rather than break it up, we probably just take both of them together because of in the interest of time. Do they have a cadre of Grenadian professionals who can repair and calibrate medical instruments at the General Hospital? So let's take those two questions. I'm not sure who is willing to respond. Maybe Dr. Mitchell?
Yes, I think Dr. Mitchell should address this.
Yeah.
Yes, but I don't know if I have all of the answers and 100% of the answers, but I think if you're talking Grenadian there, you're talking more to me than Dr. Slater, and particularly from a ministerial point of view, having been there, yes. So in terms of calibration, let me take the last question first. In terms of calibration of medical instruments, I would like to answer by saying that there has been intentions to do so, and we meaning Grenada, of course, did send one or two persons to sort of like learn the skill set to be able to do that. So there is, as far as I am aware, a biomedical technician, Grenadian, that is, who is working at the hospital. But you know how it is. They, just come back, not as experienced as our Cuban compatriots, but she's learning. And so, yes, that skill set is being harnessed to be able to treat with some of the equipments that we may have. Of course, the diversity of medical equipment is really, really vast, so that a lot more can be done in that particular area. And just as a matter of segueing, so we do have, at the same time, we do have Cuban technicians running or working alongside with that Grenadian technician to ensure that there is sort of transforming or assisting with that technical know-how going forward. In terms of the first question, geriatric treatment, As Kennedy said, and I think Dougie made mention of it, countries are sometimes being rated on how much care they provide to that population, and that is an important indice of WHO and other organizations. If you ask me, much more could be done. And of course, we have to have the expertise to be able to do that as well. And of course, the policy decision would and must be aligned to ensuring that that kind of care is afforded or is, you know, affordable to the population. So whereas there might or there is a certain level of that happening, but if you ask me, much more is desired to fulfill what we should be administering or making available to that kind of population. So that is, in short, how I would try to respond to those two queries.
If I may just add quickly, with respect to the geriatric or care for the elderly, again, and I want to go back to how important it is that policy guidance and the impact of Cuban policy on some of our member states. In St. Vincent,
Dougie, you have muted, I'm sorry. Go back to St. Vincent.
Sorry, in St. Vincent and the Grenadines, as minister, our government took some guidance exactly from the policies of the Cuban government of the universal health care. And we established a system of home care for the elderly, which has been highly rated. And we also constructed 2 buildings where it's like a daycare, where elderly persons, their relatives can drop them off in the morning, they spend the day among others, play games, etc. And again, all of that is a reflection of the following of these universal healthcare policies that we saw and learned from Cuba. So I think it's something that we, and I mentioned already in the other question about the biomedical training. We benefited a lot from the Cuban biomedical technicians, and also I can't recall, but I know some training of some technicians went to Cuba too. Thank you.
And Sonia, just in terms of to add to the area pertaining to geriatric care.
Sonia, I think oh, sorry, Kennedy, we have a little bit of an issue. So in terms of bringing on the ambassador, so we'll allow you to speak afterwards because he's been waiting for a while. So Sonia, back to you, and you can always let Kennedy speak again later.
Thank you, Val. So we've heard everything, and it seems like all the accolades are correctly directed to the people and the leaders of Cuba. Our ambassador in Grenada, recently initiated the services ambassador, Senor Luis Ernesto Morejon Rodriguez is here with us, and I invite Dr. Malachi Dartin to introduce him so he can give us his words this afternoon. Dr. Dartin.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Esteemed audience, may I extend warm embrace and fraternal greetings to everyone this evening. For me, it is indeed quite welcoming, extremely pleasing to have the responsibility and the desire to introduce the Cuban ambassador to Grenada to deliver the final intervention at this historic but commemorative event. But even more engagingly, to express a profound appreciation to him. With a short notice, resoundingly responded to the call for conferencing at today's activity. Ambassador, yours is an awesome responsibility for the symbolism of today's event in Grenada. And we take this opportunity to wish you and your family the best in your career endeavor as your sojourn in Grenada. Your Excellency Luis Ernesto Rodriguez has been an exceptional diplomatic and has had an exceptional diplomatic and educational career. He is the holder of a degree in education from the Higher Teachers Training Institute, Havana, and Masters in International Political Relationship from the Higher Institute of International Relationship, Havana, Cuba. His career history has started as a professor at the Higher Teaching Training Institute and director of the Central Computer Science Educational Institute, Havana. He worked at the Division of Sub-Saharan Africa Ministry of Foreign Affairs, Cuba, and additionally as a second secretary at the Cuban Embassy at Turkey, and interestingly, first secretary at the Cuban Embassy at Germany. Distinguished ladies and gentlemen, may I invite Your Excellency Luis Ernesto Rodriguez to the virtual lectern to deliberate. Your Excellency, welcome to the lectern. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Good evening, dear friends. It is an honor and a pleasure to have been invited to participate in this event. It is an extraordinary opportunity to know and learn more about the historical and health wealth of your people. I was wondering what to tell you today after everything that has been said in the last 2 years about the Cuban medicine and scientists, whose attitudes honor and help and exalt the homeland. As we have done and we will continue to do, I return to Fidel and his founding words. On October 17, 1962, at a historic moment for Cuban medicine, and by extension for the revolution and for internationalism, the Victoria de Girón Institute of Basic and Preclinical Science was inaugurated. There, speaking with the students and professors, Fidel, who we must evoke every time we talk about medicine and internationalism, announced what will be the most formidable training program for health specialists in the country and for cooperation with other nations. He said, "The revolution today has strength and resources and organization and men, which is the most important thing, to begin a training plan for doctors in a quantities that are necessary, and not only many, but above all good, and not only good as doctors, but good as men and women, as patriots and as revolutionaries. And who says that the revolution cannot do that? We are already able." This was expressed as early as October 1962, the 4th year of the revolution, not only newly born, but also besieged and already plundered in its human resources, especially doctors. Let us not forget that more than half of the health professionals who practiced in Cuba in 1959 emigrated in the first year, having been submitted by the market. In this exactly the same old formula that the historical enemy of the revolution now appeals in order to fracture cooperation in its attempt to put a price on the dignity of our professionals. What they do know is that the dignity of a people is not broken by breaking that of some individuals. Those who think like this ignore the history of Cuba cooperation in this field, which will be 60 years old in 2023. Precisely in that act of October 1962, Fidel announced that the first internationalist mission of the revolution in the newly independent Algeria, the first of tens of thousands who, guided by principle of solidarity and humanism, took many of the best children of Cuba to remote places around the world for 59 years, places forgotten by the selective medical service of savage capitalism and its advocates and defense. Cuba doctors have written a worldly, heroic, glorious, and internationalist history, known and recognized by prestigious international organizations, among which the Pan American Health Organization and the World Health Organization stand out. Some of these missions are really fits, like the fight against Ebola in Africa, against cholera in Haiti, against the aftermath of nature disaster, such as those carried out by 26 brigades of the Heron Reef International Contingent in Pakistan, Indonesia, Mexico, Ecuador, Peru, Chile, and Venezuela, among other countries, and also against blindness in Latin America and the Caribbean through the brilliant initiative of Mission Miracle. The United Nations Development Program and the World Health Organization qualified the Cuban medical collaboration as an example of good practice in triangular cooperation and implementation of the 2030 Agenda with its sustainable development goals. In Cuba, life professionals are trained with an attitude contrary to mercantilist calculations, altruism, generosity. The willingness to save life without taking of the cost is the fundamental principle in professional training. We are deeply proud of each of them, as well as of those who guarantee the health of the people in what we could call the first combat front. They are a symbol of the country that formed them and an example of the type of men and women we aspire to be in Cuban society, based on justice and humanism, and not on the law of the strongest. I invite you to remember what Fidel said about the doctor trained in Cuba. The most important thing we have to be the total dedication to the most noble and humane traits, saving lives and preserving health. More than doctors, they will be jealous guardians of the most precious of the human beings, apostles and creators of a more humane world. Brothers and sisters, relations between our countries are historic and marked by strong ties and deep roots. I take this opportunity to convey a greeting from the Cuban people to the people of Grenada and the other countries of the Caribbean. We appreciate the solidarity that we have always received from Grenada and the other Caribbean countries in our struggle to achieve justice for our people and in the rejection of the economic, commercial, and financial blockade of the United States intended to suffocate the Cuban people. Cuba will continue to resolutely promote solidarity, cooperation, and integration to strengthen fraternal bonds among the nations belonging to the Caribbean region. In this sense, I'm the barrier of my country's will to deepen our friendship and cooperation. Cuba has reached a high level in the scientific sphere, biotechnology, medical services, education, culture, and sports, which we make available to Grenada and the others. I appreciate the mutual willingness to continue the consolidation of bilateral relations. It is in our hand to continue working with passion and determination, and we will dedicate all of our effort to this purpose. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Senor Embajador. And I'm going to invite everyone to unmute your mic and make a resounding applause of gratitude and solidarity to the people of Cuba. Viva el pueblo cubano. Viva Cuba.
Viva.
Viva
Cuba.
Entre Cuba y el Caribe. Muchísimas gracias, señor embajador. Muchísimas gracias, pueblo cubano. Muchísimas gracias. Es la porción más profunda de nuestra alma. Thank you so very much, and thank you for sharing with us this afternoon.
Bueno, bueno,
Viva,
bueno,
viva,
bueno.
viva.
Thank you. All right, thank you. Please mute your mics. Thank you. Thank you, Sarah. I know we want to continue to discuss this, but I'm going to ask us to let us leave this for the informal part because we still have a little bit of an official function to go. We probably need to have this meet more than once a year because there's so much that we want to share and so much we want to do and so much we still know that we can do. Like I said, the Grenada Revolution is just in a different phase. We're all here ready to take on the dreams that we started on March 13th, 1979. We've saluted our comrades who have passed on, but maybe we forget sometimes the other comrades. We also know that comrades have served in other areas besides medicine. They've served in agronomy, they've served in finance and management, they've served in education, etc. And so at this point, I would like us, and I'm going to ask you, and I'm finished saying the last name, again, to give a round of applause in recognition of all our colleagues, all our comrades who journeyed with us to Cuba and who have since transitioned into the other world. And I will call the names, and then we can, at the end of it, there are about a dozen of us. Dr. Raphael Carib John, Dr. David Lambert, Dr. Winston Tomo Thomas, Dr. Ashford Mace Robertson, Dr. Colleen Calliste, Ms. Marcia Filbert Jules, Mr. Arlington Henry, Mr. Anthony Sylvester, Mr. John Viveg, Mr. Asquith Duncan, Mr. Martin Williams, and Ms. Pauline John St. Paul. So let us show gratitude to them, to their families who are here present, our respect and our most profound thanks for the services that they have done for our countries, for Caribbean integration. And we've had colleagues who have died on other islands, and even though we're not mentioning them, we keep them in our hearts and we keep the camaraderie and the Caribbean integration. We always say that people in Cuba did better than the rest of CARICOM, but we know how that go, Ducky. So let us unmute our mics, and again, please give a round of applause as we remember our colleagues who have fallen.
Yay!
Hasta la victoria siempre.
Hasta la victoria siempre. Thank you. Thank you. Can you mute your mics, everyone? Thank you so very much. Mr. John, there's a song by Gramps. I think I lost John. There's a dedication in song by Gramps Morgan, a place up there for people as you.
If you give a little more than you take, and if you try to fix more than you break, if you're the kind who takes the time to help a stranger in the rain, there's a place for people like you. If you stand up for those down on their knees and lend a voice to those who cannot speak, if you shine a little light, give sight to the ones who've lost their way, there's a place for people like you. I've heard up there the streets are made of gold, and when you get there, there's a hand to hold. I believe when your days down here are through, there's a place up there for people like you. If you walk around with your heart on your sleeve and
And if you're trying to be the change you wanna see, if you lay down your life for love so someone could be saved, there's a place for people like you. I heard up there the streets are made of gold, and when you get there, there's a hand to hold. I believe when your days down here are through, there's a place up there for people like you. Streets are made of gold, and when you get there, there's a hand to hold. I believe when your days down here are through, yeah, there's a place up there for people like you. I know you're out there, so keep doing what you do, 'cause there's a place up there for people like you. Out of many young people we are.
Well, I hope I can catch my breath and my heart doesn't stop pumping so fast. Thank you for that. And I think the greatest honor we can afford to our fallen colleagues and comrades is to take from their example. Are you ready to be like them? Will we serve as we asked to serve? Are we people like them? And as we continue, as Grenfell continues its fora in the next couple weeks, we're going to focus a little on agriculture. On March 21st, on March 23rd, which is Wednesday? Next week, Wednesday, there'll be a forum on agriculture on WPG 10, that is Hamlet Mark Station or Channel 10 on the TV. Agriculture, dying or recovering perspectives. It's going to be at 8:30 p.m. to 9:30. It's only an hour. This should be an intense hour because agriculture has been the big talk. So that's on the 23rd. And then the following week, there's another forum on agriculture, the new faces of agriculture. Again, 8:30 to 9:30. That's one next week Wednesday at 8:30 to 9:30, and one the following Wednesday, 8:30 to 9:30. WPG 10 or Channel 10 on our television. Please be there. I'm sure we have a lot to hear and a lot to. So we've transitioned for over 43 years and here we're still going. Our colleagues today offered a lot of insight, a lot of history, and a lot of advice, and a lot of pathways, choices for pathways that we should. But I think this last song said it. Are you going to be like that? And as we come to this, the formal end of our program for this afternoon, this evening, it's already night. I want to invite our comrade Gallo Raymond Nurse, who went to Germany. Don't know, he didn't come to Cuba, but he went to Germany in 1980 to study. And Dr. Nurse, who is a geologist, will bring us now the vote of thanks.
As I was told last night and give task to hold this vote of thanks today, I thought it would have been a very easy situation, as I would normally do as a lecturer, public speaker, of the wrist flick of my arms, but on listening to the speakers and also perusing the attendance list, I'm now in a state of very mixed emotions and mix-up moods. So I would simply say I'm very humbled, honored, excited, sad, and happy at the same point in time to have been tasked with giving this vote of thanks on this memorable evening that marks the 43rd anniversary of the 1979 March 13th Grenada Revolution. Seeing the content of the program, I was really thrilled, of course, to want to, in the name of the three comrades who have been highlighted this evening, and as we heard, there are many other comrades who have fallen as well, but we have decided to highlight three comrades, very close ones to me. Thinking about Carib. I only met Carib when he came to GBSS at Form 6 at with E-levels. And then he was a fine character, a powerful brethren, intelligent as everyone has said about him, no doubt. Then talking about Dr. David Lambert, a brethren that when he came to Grenada lived just about 100 meters away from me on the lane in Big Dick, at the house on the lane, just below Blue Danube. Knowing his qualities as well inspired me as a lane boy to want to run as fast as him for GBSS, but had no chance. He was too good. And all these things that he has done thereafter, enough praise. Then when talking about Tommy and other brethren, connected in all different means and ways, playing football, cricket in the guideout, and doing all the craziest things of all. And this is one of the letters that Tommy wrote to me when he went to Grenada in 1989, telling me about the situation in Grenada for those brethren who returned from Cuba and other places. Sad situation. And that makes it more sad to see that my brethren is not here today among us. Then, on behalf of the Grenada Revolution Memorial Foundation, I would like to say thank you for the committee and this organization that has been heading and spearheading such activities for the last few years, at least 5 that I would know of, where I've been actively involved. And this has been put in the forefront and headed and spearheaded and led by the comrade Ruggles Ferguson, another comrade who is responsible for me being here in Germany. He was the one that came here representing the NYO in 1980 and got a scholarship for me to come to Germany. And this is a long letter written to me by Ruggles after the invasion and subsequent. You can see the situation in Grenada. There was no address on Ruggles, even where to be found. So that would tell the intensity of what was going on. So ladies and gentlemen, thank you, Ruggles, for organizing this with the other members of the celebration committee, the hardworking comrades in the background. And of course, great thank you for John Calliste who has provided and has been providing this service with his station, GMFM, and doing a number of different hard tasks over the last 2 years since he has been in action, presenting these activities and giving us the opportunity to spread wide and loud to all parts of our globe, continental internationalism. And of course, my sister Sonia, classmate from Heinz School, Dr. Nixon, have always been brilliant since in Heinz School, we know that. So thank you for your wonderful moderation this evening. We could have done it better without you here today. You have done a marvelous job in bridging the gaps and putting things together. And of course, to the panelists who have made some interesting remarks, every one of them. Let me start with the first one that started off, Dr. George Mitchell. Your humility, the lessons that you have learned, that you have stated, I guess, for every professional and those to be, is a page that we all pick from. Even at our old age, we're never too old to learn. And you have been a shining star in the work that you have done in Grenada. I got to know you all in the Revo with one of the brethren from St. David Pucks. You guys were very marvelous guys in youthful time. And then I will also say to Kennedy Roberts, Kennedy again a GBSS boy, and marvelous the things that you have done since leaving GBSS and all those highs that you have made in the field of healthcare and all the services you have rendered. Big up, comrade. Thanks for the insight into your background and what you are doing today. The journey continues. And of course, to our brethren from the sister island, our Dr. Douglas Slater, what you have said this evening here is so enriching. It's so enriching. I think everyone has listened here carefully, and you have added quite a lot. It's one of the best functions that I've ever visited or ever taken part in all the sessions that we have had over the years with that level of input and lessons that we can learn with respect to how we deal with our Caribbean people, and of course with our we can't pay lesser dues to the people of Cuba. Thank you, Dr. Slater, for all the inputs you have given here today. It was very inspiring. And of course, to all the families of our friends who have passed on, thank you for being here. The family from Dr. Raphael John, the family from Dr. David Lambert, the family from Dr. Winston Thomas, thank you all for attending. Thank you also for all the persons, the friends who are here gathered this evening, spending your Saturday evening to be part of this memorable situation. And of course, last but not least, this tribute, this thank you, this muchas gracias goes out to the Cuban ambassador and to the Cuban people. I would say, viva la amistad entre los pueblos cubanos y granadinos. Viva la revolución, and long live the medical doctors of Grenada and Cuba and all the international doctors that got training in Cuba and all the other graduates in all areas of science, and to those of us whose kids, as Morris would say, at the start of the revolution, given the opportunities to continue studying medicine and all the other faculties at the universities of Cuba, so that we'll come back to Grenada and liberate from all the situation at present. Thank you, guys. Long live from Germany. Thank you very much.
Well, thank you, Gallo, and good morning to you. I hope you're going to church later, well,
Yes,
the next couple hours. So, ladies and gentlemen, we've come to the end of, I think, what has been a wonderful, wonderful evening together. I think the March 13 committee and the other organization has really outdone themselves on this, and we look forward to us collaborating more. I'm going to invite you, however, as we complete this section, I'm going to invite you to stay on. There's still a lot of chat. Last week we went on for 3 hours. Some of us probably didn't make it to church that morning because we were up so late. But I want to thank Gallo for his long words of gratitude. But that's Gallo, okay, guys, we're accustomed to that. I just want to remind you, next week and the week after, that's Wednesday 23rd and Wednesday 30th at 9:30 p.m. on WPG 10 or on Channel 10. That there will be 2 for 1, both on agriculture. The first one, agriculture dying or
8:30.
8:30 to 9:30. Dying or recovering perspectives. And the next one will be the new faces of agriculture. And you know, we have a lot of young people and a lot of other people, a lot of girls who are participating as people who plant food so we can grow what we eat, and that the health sector will have less challenge by obesity and all the other challenges we have. So, ladies and gentlemen, this is where we end the official part, and we ask you can open your mics and see all the people you haven't seen for a long time and say hello and hug and kiss and promise to send barrel and whatever you want to do. But thank you for being here. It was really a pleasure serving you this evening. All the best to everybody. Viva la revolution. Forward ever, backward never.
Thank you, Sonia.
I didn't say it, but when I went to Cuba, I traveled from St. Vincent in a ramboat boat going down Trinidad to collect my visa for myself and 2 others.
So funny.
I had to slip away. Without the then government knowing.
So you're going to Caracou. You're coming home.
Yeah, man. And I came down and
I want to share one thing because we may have bled for the Eastern Caribbean, that whole pioneership. But like Dougie said, we had the Guyanese a long time before us. Everybody know Chesney, the one survivor.
Yeah.
Who died recently, right? Died a couple of years ago.
Oh yeah, I was not aware of that.
Yes, I think he did. And but he was an old man by then, okay? He had lived out his years, missed the boat, missed the plane, and kept his life. But the Jamaicans had been there before us, and I remember where I learned to dance to Caroline and all the scam music of the Jamaican thing. And I see some of the Jamaican colleagues were here earlier, and we want to thank them because they were the ones who held our hand. And there's one person I keep forgetting to mention, our first ambassador, Richard Jacobs, who became the father to all of us. Richard was ambassador for Dougie and all of them, but I don't know how. Of course. Because Vincent John's a Grenadians.
Okay, that's a Grenadian. I know you're coming with that, Sonia.
But Richard took on,
That's true.
Took on parenthood for all of us who came from Eastern Caribbean. The St. Lucians were there the year after us. The Dominicans came with us and came after. Vinci, there was what's his name from St. Kitts Nevis, and Richard was the ambassador. Remember him today. I should have mentioned him when we were remembering our fallen. He was an ambassador for the students. He saw to every need, and even though he was also transitioning, he had never lived in a Spanish-speaking country, he was